lot of information about policy. We're getting a lot of information about law changes, but we also recognize that this situation that we all find ourselves in has a mental and emotional component. And so like, what can we do to serve our members? So I'm really grateful to Karina, to Ashley, to Miriam for bringing me on board and being able to share this work with you. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Here we go. So let's start off. Let me start off by asking you a question. Raise your hand if you would like to feel less anxiety in your life. Good, solid. Raise your hand if you want to know how to soothe yourself should you be in anxiety. Okay, great. You're in the right place. So that is really what we are going to be talking about today in this talk. And as I mentioned with Zoom, you can make it so there's a long list of little boxes on the side. If you go to the top, you can make it just one box. You can minimize it and get rid of the boxes and pictures of people all together. It's up to you how you want to structure it. And you can move that box all around your screen. Bring it up top, bring it down bottom. So along those lines of getting used to Zoom, I would like to know from you in the chat box, which is down below. Let me see if I can get back on. Who is on your quarantine? Who are you quarantining with? Who's in your bubble? And it might just be you. It might be you and like somebody else that lives in another location. You two are quarantine buddies. It could be your family. As Karina mentioned, I have a 9-year-old daughter who's in 4th grade, 7-year-old son in 1st grade, and dog, husband. They might be making a guest appearance. I don't really know. And I can't see, oh, this is interesting, Karina. When we did this, I can't see the chat box. What are people saying? You might need to inform me. Oh, wait, hold on. That is no good. I thought I could see the chat box, but I can't. Hold on.
Do you want us to read it out, Allison?
Yeah, I'm just curious. Yeah. Where are people? Are people with people or are they separate?
Karina, I think you're on mute and you were trying to talk, so go ahead.
I unmuted myself. I was just going to say, why don't I just read out a few, and then Allison, when it comes time for questions, I'll just.
Oh wait, I just found this. I just found the chat box. Okay,
perfect.
Hold on a sec. I found it.
Okay.
Excellent. Technical difficulties. Okay, husband, spouse, sister, Gail's with her husband, Margot's with husband and dog, with their dog. I love that our pets are getting so much attention. By yourself, couple of people on their own. Excellent. Brother-in-law, husband, kids at daycare. Woohoo! Oh, that's a gift. Living solo, on their own. Okay, ex-husband's cat. I love that, Lumi. Just me, but constantly checking in with friends. Excellent. 12-year-old kid. Wonderful. So we've got a variety. A lot of people, it sounds like, are at home. They're on their own, but they're with their cats and dogs. And then we also have some that are with families. That's super helpful for me to know. Excellent. So the thing about this is we're going to be at different stages depending on our situation and just different stages depending on ourselves. So I want to tell you, hold on a sec. I want to tell you a little bit about me and about how this COVID-19 thing stopped me in my tracks and how I kind of worked through it. So just to reset, one of the things that Karina talked about was that I give talks on imposter syndrome, and that is very much a personal story of mine. The reason why I help so many of my clients with imposter syndrome is because I am a recovering imposter. And when I worked at Google, I oversaw a large team. And when I was in the midst of imposter syndrome, which is basically you feel like a fraud, you feel like the world is going to collapse, there's a lot of anxiety, I felt so stuck. Like the anxiety was so huge. I was worried about losing my job. I was worried about with the impacts of my family. I was the main breadwinner for my family. I found myself crying all the time, like every day on the way to work, on the way home from work. And I was seeing a therapist, but I couldn't quite find my way out of the anxiety. I couldn't quite find my way out of that feeling stuck. And when COVID-19 hit, you know, I did all the things at the beginning. I prepared, did the shopping, got everything, you know, cleaned everything, did all of that. But then there was this down point where I had done all the things, and that same feeling, it was a totally different circumstance, but that same feeling of doom, of feeling stuck, of anxiety, it all came rushing back just as potently as it was back then. And it just felt like it was never going to end. And I remember just feeling distraught, easy to cry, feeling a bit numb, like the world had stopped and yet it was still going. And it was just really disorienting. And I was in like a really devastated place, wondering if my business was going to survive, wondering what the impacts to my family and loved ones would be. And I found myself like sunk at that same bottom of that hole again. But what was different is that I was different. I didn't have tools back then when I was stuck in that pattern for months, if not years. I had tools now. And so I just relied on those tools. I knew that no matter what happened in my outside world, I could still care for myself on my inside world. So I reached out to my trusted people. I sobbed wildly over a Zoom call with someone who I love who lives in Portland. I cried. I surrendered to the feelings that I was having, the grief, the fear, the anxiety, just allowed myself to kind of fall into them. And I was able to, like, I stopped shoulding on myself, you know, this shoulding. When I stopped telling myself I should work, I should do these things, I basically allowed my life to stop as much as a mother of 2 young kids with a dog and a husband and a business could. I just did the bare minimum. And that state lasted about 3 days, just shy of 3 days of being in total grief. And come the 4th day, I wasn't in that dark, scary place, but I was more just super tired and exhausted. And I just let myself be there. And come day 5, I woke up energized, joyful, creative. I banged out all the projects that I had sitting on my plate and just like knocked them all out in a day. And I've been pretty much up ever since. It doesn't mean I don't go like this, because I do. But what I realized is that by using the tools that I have, the tools and the strategies, what would have been months was condensed to 3 days. And it's really hard for me to like even connect with that person I was for those 3 days, because that was such a dark point, but I'm in a different place now. And so that's the difference. That's the difference between having tools and strategies and not. And that's why I'm here, because there's so many of us that are in struggle. We're all experiencing the same, we're experiencing it in different ways, but we're experiencing the same event globally, personally. And but if we can adopt some tools and strategies, and we can help our inner world be okay despite the chaos of the outer world. So that's the reason for this talk. That's what I hope to give you and hope to offer you. Now, in this, I've got to look, my chat boxes, here we go. I'm moving it. So in this talk, here's what we're going to do. Here's what you're going to get. And number 1, understanding why this COVID-19 is so different. And we get it from the news point of view. It's a global pandemic, hasn't happened in 100 years. We get it from that, but why it's so different for us in terms of our mental and emotional well-being. We're going to talk about a lot of tools to break up that anxiety, fear, despair cycle, should you find yourself in it. We're also going to go over several ways to calm and reset your nervous system to get your body back online. And then we're going to talk about tools and strategies that can help us have a balanced perception so we can still tap into our resourcefulness, okay? So that's a little bit of a high-level overview of what we're going to be doing. Sound good? Okay. The other thing, I'm just checking my notes here. One question, anybody sometimes like to be perfect? Raise your hand if you sometimes like to be perfect. I know I do. I have a, thank you for those of you willing to admit it. And when it comes to learning tools, especially, we can get this like, okay, I've got to take in all the tools. I want to do them all, and I kind of want to do them well. And that is great. That is a great goal. That is a great vision. But the learning process, as we are all who are experiencing learning at home, trying to teach our children, is messy. It is not exactly a one and done thing. It's a little bit like babies learning how to crawl. They don't just go from crawling to walking. They get up, they fall down, they get up, they fall down. So as we go through this content, I'm not going to be able to share with you all of my tools, but I'm going to hopefully share the most impactful ones. But as we go through this content, what I'd invite you to consider is that you're looking to make a 1 degree shift. Just a 1 degree. Just change it just slightly. Because if you sustain that 1 degree over time, you're going to be on a totally different path than the one you're on now. So as you go through this, figure out the ones that are resonating with you, the ones you want to commit to, and practice, practice, practice. Practice makes progress, not practice makes perfect. Okay. All right. Just doing a little quick check. Great. So now, again, I'd like to invite you to use the chat box because I want this to be as interactive as possible. And I'd like for you to think about your mental and emotional state. And you can go as high level or as you would like to. What mental or emotional challenges are you facing right now as a result of the impacts of COVID-19? Where are you at? What are some of those challenges? I know for me, it was fear of loss of income, fear of the unknown, great. Anxiety, fear, frustration, no motivation, the uncertainty, the roller coaster ride, yes, the lack of focus. It's hard to get a grip on what's real, absolutely, we're gonna talk about that. Disorientation, patience, I am not a teacher, yes. Oh, loss, yes. Loss of everything in so many ways. Cancellation, yes. Disorganized, finding ways to prioritize all the demands, excellent. Yes. Oh, the missing of human connection, for sure. Not being able to see friends and family, lack of communication, hugs. Oh, it'll be so nice when we can hug people again. Oh, trying to present an appearance of calm and solidness when feeling up and down. Oh my gosh, absolutely. Lack of control, these are great. Worried about my mom. Yes, we can be worried about the people that we love. So I'm seeing a lot of head nodding. Are we all in agreement? Like we're all experiencing a bit of this? Yes. So wonderful. So these are the challenges, right? Like it's helpful to name them because when, you know, in the coaching world or in the therapy world, you say, if you name it, you can tame it. So it's good to name it. So let's see. So now I'd like to invite you, where do you want to be in your mental and emotional state? Let's say 3 to 6 months from now. Not where do you want to be, like, yes, we all want to be outside hugging our loved ones, but where do you want to be internally from your mental and emotional point of view? What do you want to be? Great, grateful, confident, serene, less anxious. Yes, feeling secure, calm, acceptance, thinking of possibility, acceptance and calm, collected, Calm, accepting. I'm seeing a lot of those words. At peace, at what I can't change. Yes. Level, using the learnings. Settled, calm, feeling progress, less worried. Changed in some way for the better. I love that. Hopeful. Excellent. So this is also, yes, connected. These are ways that we can, again, it's like when we can name our vision, then we can start moving towards it. So this is great. You know, I think we all kind of, what I'm hearing in this is, we know that our circumstances may not change, but we can change. I think that's the beauty of all of this. No matter what happens on the outside of us, we can make sure that we can change. And these tools and strategies don't prevent you from going into the darkness, right? Like clearly they didn't prevent me from going into the darkness. They don't prevent you from going in there, but they help you bounce back. They help you like get that resiliency, that bouncing back. Excellent. So hold on a sec. So what we're going to do from here is we're going to talk about some of the uniqueness around COVID. We're going to go around like why this is such a problem, because it can seem like in our minds, we can make it seem like it's not that big of a problem because we're all sitting in our pajamas, binge watching Netflix, but yet there is something more that's happening. And for those of you who were at my imposter syndrome talk, this slide will be familiar to you. So one of the things that happens anyway, before all of this hit, before COVID-19 was even in our vocabulary, we were all probably in your line of work experiencing some amount of VUCA. VUCA is an acronym. It was started, I believe, in the War College here in the United States, and it stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So this is why we feel imposter syndrome. This is why our confidence gets rattled, is because there is a certain level of volatility. Things are changing in unpredictable ways. There's uncertainty where we don't really know what exactly is going to happen. It's hard to anticipate. There's complexity. There's lots of systems at play that all have impacts on each other. And there's ambiguity. There's a lot of unknown unknowns. And so that was already existing, my guess is, in your life to a certain extent. That with your job or with your family, there was a certain level of VUCA that was present. And now with COVID-19 and all of its impacts, the VUCA levels have increased. Not just for us individually or even nationally, but internationally. There's a higher level of volatility. Things are changing. There's uncertainty. We don't know how this whole thing is going to plan out. It's complex. It's impacting so many different areas. And there's ambiguity. There's so many unknowns because this is such a new virus, right? So I say this not to increase the anxiety, but I can tell you I'm already feeling like my anxiety going up even just talking about it. But I say this because it's important to know the soup we're sitting in. And it can be hard sometimes when things are so monotonous and so predictable in our daily lives, right? We're still in the same place. We've got the same cat. We're in the same location. But what's happening, even though everything seems super calm and maybe even boring sometimes, there's also this higher level of VUCA that we are steeped in. And so that's why our minds in the background, it's hard to focus because in the background, our minds are still trying to make some sense of all of this VUCA that's happening. And it's why our ability to focus can get diminished. Okay. So that's one thing. The other thing that's also happening in our lives, specifically to us and collectively, is grief and anticipatory grief. This comes from the work of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and David Kessler. There was a really great article that went around that talked about like, oh, what we're experiencing is grief. And anticipatory grief is the grief that we expect to be experiencing as this progresses. And I promise this will be the lowest point of this presentation. We're nowhere but up from here, okay? But I wanna tell you this so that you have some context to kind of put your experiences in. So we may have heard of these stages of grief, but I wanna walk us through them again. These happen in a non-linear fashion. So, and they happen in kind of that up and down thing that you might be experiencing. So one stage is denial. It's like avoidance, refusal to understand. I know we here in the United States are experiencing people going to protests, and it's like, that's the picture of denial. It's like, I refuse to accept that this is real. And we may have family members. I know for many of my friends in the older generation and some of the people I know and love, they're like, I've been through Vietnam and I've been through all these other things. This virus isn't going to affect me, right? Like that's denial. Anger, frustration, irritation, and anxiety. We are going to see more tantrums. Tantrums from ourselves, tantrums from our children, tantrums from our coworkers. We're going to get angry at the virus. We're going to have irritation. We're going to be quick to tantrum and explode. Bargaining. Bargaining is like, okay, I can make it till July, but you know what? After that, I can't even think about if this lasts any longer, right? Like, so I just want this to stop, like, but there's no way, this better not be happening, you know, like my kids' birthdays are in August and I'm like, oh my gosh, this thing better not be happening when their birthdays come, right? Like that's the bargaining. It's like, oh, maybe it'll just go away. And then there's depression. This is kind of what my story was. I was overwhelmed, helpless, numbing, you know, where it's just like, it can't sink in, where you just feel flat and low, and maybe a lot of sorrow happens in depression. And then acceptance. Acceptance is kind of when you're planning, you're kind of exploring options. But I'll tell you, to me, acceptance is not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily be like, okay, let's plan, let's get everything going, right? Like sometimes it can feel like that. But I think there's another kind of acceptance that's a little bit Leonard Cohen-like. It's like there's a cold and it's a broken hallelujah. It's sometimes acceptance is cold and broken. It's just like, okay, I give, uncle, I surrender to this, right? So that's what acceptance can be. And what's nice about acceptance is then you can do the planning. Then you can actually go, okay, well, if I can't do all these other things, what can I do? You start opening up to those possibilities. And then they added on one more stage, which is meaning, which is finding significance. Increasing of connection. It's like that all things happen for a reason kind of thing, maybe. It's like, okay, let me find the significance of how this had a positive impact in my life. So these are stages that we can all vary through, and the people we love, the people we work with, they're going to be on their journey, right? We're all in this together. And so just know that if you're cycling through these, that's normal. That's exactly where you're supposed to be, and that's exactly where we are. Okay. And by the way, if you have any questions, feel free to, along the way, feel free to throw them in the chat box or, you know, unmute yourself at any time. Okay. All right. So now that everyone's anxiety is fully up, or at least mine is a little more escalated, let's talk about what we can do, okay? So first I want to tell you a story. So this blurry picture, my apologies, is a pink hospital on Honolulu, like in Honolulu, Hawaii. And if anyone has been there, you may recognize this giant, huge pink hospital. It's a military hospital. And a friend of mine lived for a while in Hawaii, in Honolulu, or outside of Honolulu. And I went to visit her. She had just had a baby, and then she also had a 4-year-old at the time. And the 4-year-old, right before I got there, had cut his finger really badly and had to get stitches at the big pink hospital on the hill. And And when I got there, a couple days after I got there, he had to get them removed. And, you know, to a 4-year-old, going to the hospital, getting stitches, it's all a very painful, traumatic event. And this hospital is huge and it's up on the hill, so you can see it basically from all over the island. And my friend lived about a half hour outside of the city. And so we spent a car ride together, and I'm in the back seat with him, and he's freaking out. And he keeps saying, not the pink, not the pink. And he'd look out the window and be like, not the pink, I don't want to go to the pink. And even though we were talking to him, you know, you're just getting the stitches removed. It's not going to hurt. He couldn't quite get there because that wasn't real to him, right? His only association with the pink hospital was pain. And here's the thing about our brains. These are two important things to know about our brains, all brains. Number one, we have something called a negativity bias. A negativity bias means that we have a sticky brain for negative things that happen and a slippery brain for the positives. This helps us with survival, right? We need to remember the plant that made us sick because we're not going to eat that thing twice. So our brains have this negativity bias where we really can remember the negative things. It's like Velcro for the negative things, and it's like Teflon, super slippery for the positives. We remember them, but they're slippery. We kind of forget about them, but the negative things we really can hold on to. And so even though I believe he had been to the pink hospital lots of times before, he was only remembering the stitches day, right? He was only remembering the painful day. All those other times, you know, seeing his doctor for checkup appointments, gone. The second thing to know about our brains is that we cannot the brain cannot distinguish a real from an imagined event. So again, the brain cannot distinguish between a real and imagined event. So what that means is that if you imagine something terrible happening, your body responds as if it is happening, even though it's not, even though you're just imagining it happening. That's why, I don't know if any of you have had this experience, but you know, you're driving to the grocery store and suddenly you're envisioning the funeral of a loved one. And then you're crying because your brain is at the funeral of the loved one. You're imagining them dying and you're getting all upset and you're just trying to drive to Costco. Like that, the reason why we can get into that emotional state is because our brains are not distinguishing the difference between something that's really happening and something we're imagining happening. And so when my friend's son was in the car, nothing was happening. Nothing was happening to his finger, but he was imagining what had happened. And he was imagining the pain, which was causing him to cry and to freak out. And this is what's happening with all of us. We can imagine terrible futures, and then we put our bodies in that experience of feeling it. So I'm going to walk you through what I did with my friend's son, because the way that we kind of helped him talk him down is going, oh, every time you go, not the pink, not the pink. I go, oh, that's interesting. We're not even in the pink. We're in the car. Like, look, your mom's driving and I'm sitting right next to you and no one's touching your finger and your sister's here. We're just in the car. And then he would kind of look around and he laughed and he's like, oh yeah. And then he would see the pink hospital and go, oh, not the pink, and go right back to it. So one of the ways that we can get ourselves out when we're in that fantasy of not the pink is to get in the now. We get our bodies, get ourselves, because our minds will travel to the pink, whatever the pink is for you. Our minds will travel there, but our bodies don't. Our bodies stay in the now all the time. This is why meditation talks about focusing on your breath, because your breath can't go into the future. It can't go into the past. It just stays right here in the present. And so one of the key ways that we can get into the now is by tuning into our senses. What do you see? Like right now, I see a computer, I see a light, I see out my window to the flowers. What do you see in front of you? I have to move my box so I can read what I wrote. What do you smell? What are any smells that you're present to? This is also a way you can soothe yourself. Putting a flower out or something that you like to look at on your desk or in front of you, inviting a pleasant smell. Touch. What are you touching? What's the temperature of the room? Do your clothes feel good on your body? Like tuning into your feet on the floor, noticing your butt in the chair, like feeling your body. Like take a moment now to just feel yourself sitting. Noticing where your arms are, noticing where your legs are. Taste. Again, this is a way we can not only come back to the now, but it's a way we can soothe ourselves. Is there something pleasant that you would like to have a taste of? What are you noticing about the taste in your mouth? Sound. What sounds are you present to? You know, that we always think that there's silence, but usually there's some hum of something going on. There's usually some other kind of sound. We maybe can hear the birds chirping. There's some other sound that we can tune ourselves in. When we do that, we take ourselves out of the fantasy of not the pink or whatever fantasy we have and bring ourselves right back to the present moment. So I invite you, if you find yourself in one of those imagined situations, to bring yourself to the now. Okay, so let's take a moment. I just want to invite you, I'll walk you through very quickly, is just to close your eyes if you're willing to. Feel your body get heavy. Just allow yourself to be supported by the chair. Allow yourself to be supported by the ground. Notice sounds, the sound of my voice, any other sounds that might be around you. Notice the temperature of the room. Notice any taste in your mouth or any smells that might be present. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and come back. How are you feeling now? If you want to do you can do an emoji or you can write in the chat box. All right, see a thumbs up. Excellent. Excellent. Lots of thumbs up. So this is how we can bring ourselves back to the current moment. Our minds can go to the fear state and then we bring it back. And it's just that exercise. We're not going to stay here permanently, but it's the exercise of pulling ourselves back that can have a profound impact on our anxiety. Okay. Oh, I love it. I don't know why I made some lentil soup, but it smells like bacon. Yes. And that can be a pleasant smell. You can decide if that feels pleasant or not. Excellent. And grounded. Love it. Okay. So the second tool that I want to offer you, and this is also to get us in our bodies more, because our bodies are always in the now. And this is also a way to reset your nervous system. So what I'd like, let me click on my thing. So one of the other things that we can do when we are finding ourselves in that anxiety and we're wanting to settle ourselves down is we can settle our nervous system. And I'd like to teach you 2 strategies to do that. Okay? So the first one, I'd like to invite you, if you're able to stand up. I invite you to actually stand up, get out of your chair, stand up, take a step back. This is a tool I like to use. I'm going to come up to my mic. This is a tool I like to use when I am, and actually I'm going to stop my share so that you can see me. Oh, wait, no, go back. This is a tool I like to use when I am feeling energetically slimed by someone. I also do it when I'm feeling nervous, but this is when, this is a great way to reset your nervous system. Okay, can you all still hear me? Can you get a thumbs up? Are you good? Okay, good. So the first thing I'd like to invite you to do is, it's pollen season here. I don't know about you guys, but I want you to like pretend like you're covered in a fine dust and just brush that shit of the day off. Just brush it off. Brush it off your arms, brush it off your chest, your belly, your hips, your butt, your legs, your feet, your hair, your face, your ears, your neck, and throat. Just brush, brush, brush. And anywhere that wants extra brushing, just give it extra brushing. Brush, 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 brush. Okay. So now I want you to just notice your body, a little tingly maybe. And then because sometimes that stuff is sticky, we're gonna shake it off. So just full body, like, just, you don't have to grunt, just shake it off. Okay. There we go. So now take a moment and just feel into your body and just notice the tingle, that kind of tingling sensation. And then what we're gonna do, it's like that just kind of like shook everything off. Then what we're gonna do is we're going to breathe. And what I like to do is visualize as I'm breathing. It's almost like I'm gonna sweep my arms over my head to gather up all I need, and then I'm gonna push it down and breathe it into me. So it goes like this. As we breathe in, let's breathe in faith. Faith that we're gonna be okay. So let's swoop all the faith of the world up on the in-breath, and then push all that faith into us on the out-breath. And then we can breathe in love. Let's do it one more time, or 2 more times. Breathe in love, gathering up all the love of the world. And on the out-breath, pushing it in. And then let's breathe in patience. Let's gather up all the patience that we need and breathe out. And then, so that already is kind of settling things, but there's one more. This is hand on the heart, hand on your belly. So hand on our heart to remember our love, our compassion, and hand on our belly to remember our wisdom and knowing, our gut instinct. And just take 3 breaths in, silent breaths in, just. And then you can come back and do a little bow. That's what sometimes I like to do. But this is a way to reset our bodies. Brush, shake, breathe in, gathering, and then hand to heart, resetting. All right. How was that? That good? This is a way that we can, excellent, I'm seeing claps, I'm seeing thumbs up. This is a way that we can bring our nervous so much cat hair. This is a way that we can bring our nervous system back to center. Another thing that we can do that's a little bit of a shortcut, and I do this anytime I'm nervous, I do this in meetings, I do this anytime that I'm feeling vulnerable, like that emotional, oh, that's great. I'll get back to you, Kimmy, on that one. Anytime you're feeling that emotional risk, that emotional exposure, is just a hand on the heart with some kind of affirmation. It's like, I am loved, I am safe, I belong. And I invite you, it's one thing to look at it and it's another thing to do it. So I just invite you to put your hand on your heart, maybe close your eyes, and just say to yourself, I am safe. I am loved. I belong. Great. So this is a quick way that we can kind of get there on our own. And you know what? People can think we have heartburn, or they won't even see it because we're on camera. It's all good. This is just a way that we can help ourselves, you know, when we've done something big, when we've taken a risk. It's another way to reset our nervous system. It's something I do sometimes when I'm with my children, helping them with their homework and feeling frustrated. Just giving a little rub and doing some breathing can be helpful to kind of take me down a notch. So Kimmy, one of the things you say, I feel like we should whoosh you. So one of the things, if you ever unmute yourself, and we will do it later on in this, is just sending a little whoosh of love, a gentle whoosh of love from our hearts to another person. So I'd like to let's all whoosh each other. So it looks like this, hands on your heart, and just a 1, 2, 3, and a whoosh. Yeah, good. We all need little whooshes every now and then. Okay. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen and getting us on this. Okay, great. So that is settling our nervous system. And I recommend this brushing and shaking and breathing, or however you want to interpret that. You can't do it enough times, right? Like you can't do it too many times. It's a good one to kind of reset our bodies. All right. Step number 3, strategy number 3, feel it to heal it. This one is one that I will say when it's the one I wish wasn't a necessary strategy. Because when it comes to feeling fear, when it comes to feeling anger, when it comes to feeling shame, all of those things, it's like, I don't want to feel those things, right? And we can do a lot to distract ourselves from that. But the problem happens is when we push those difficult emotions away, then what happens is we make a pressure cooker situation happen. And so not saying all anxiety disorders, I'm not talking about that, but a lot of the anxiety that we can feel is often due to unfelt, unexpressed emotions. So this is, it's an important tool. It's an important thing that we feel into our feelings. Now, how do we do that? First of all, one of the things that we can do is just naming it. As I said earlier, like name it to tame it, right? And so this work comes, this labeling that I'll share with you in a moment, these 5 core emotions, comes from something called shadow work, which is a whole other thing. You can look it up if you want information about it. I can give it to you. But it comes from the shadow work world, and the theory is that all emotions that we feel, frustration, despair, relief, that they are all a combination of these 5 core emotions, that if you boil them down, these are like the 5 core emotions that are really driving it. So here they are, and they're going to rhyme here for a moment. Sad, glad, mad, bad, and afraid. So sad, glad, mad, bad, and afraid. Let's walk through these. Sad is just sadness. It's grief. It's sorrow, right? Sadness. Glad, joy, happiness. Mad, anger. This is where one of those core emotions is anger. Bad is shame. If any of you follow Brene Brown, she has great descriptions of shame. Shame is where you want to hide. It's where secrecy and judgment can really live and take over. So that's bad, is shame. And then afraid is fear. This is when we're feeling fearful. So if we're frustrated, we're both mad, and there might be a little hint of shame or fear that's hidden in there. If we're confused, we might have a little bit of shame, like, uh-oh, I'm doing something wrong, as well as fear of maybe I won't get this right. So all of our emotions are kind of some combination, and we can be all of these, we can experience all 5 of these core emotions at the same time. Little hints of it, sometimes maybe more, sometimes less. But the reason why I give you this information is because when you're in the midst of a difficult feeling, it's helpful to identify what that feeling or emotion is, because feelings are interesting. The more you run from it, the bigger they get. So when I was at Google, I spent months trying to avoid my fear and shame and anger and sadness. But I couldn't quite get to glad. I couldn't quite get to my joy. Like, I could in little bits, but I couldn't quite fully step into joy because I was running so hard from all these other emotions. And there's actually some interesting brain science that talks about how these emotions live next to glad, some of these harder ones, and you almost can't access it until you get through the more challenging emotions. So the reason why I offer this is because when we're in it, we can use the tool of curiosity. We can use the tool of curiosity and get curious about the emotions that we're having. So for example, when I'm having fantasies of somebody's funeral, I know that the emotion that's trying to come out is sadness. If I'm having a fantasy about yelling at someone and tearing them down a couple of notches, I know that I'm having the emotion of anger that's trying to come out. Sometimes these things try to come out through those fantasies, through those imaginings. And so we can become curious and then name it for what it is. Ooh, I'm sad. Oh, let me just be in my sadness. Let me welcome that sadness. Let me experience that sadness. Because the sadness and the madness, the interesting thing is it won't drop. It won't go away until it is fully seen, acknowledged, and felt. And so that's why the strategy that I used when I felt the grief coming was to fully surrender to it. It's like, I'm going to give this grief whatever it needs. I'm just going to feel it. I'm going to feel it for 3 days, and it's going to suck, and it's going to be terrible, and I'm not going to like it. But once that grief kind of passed, because it will, we don't think it will, but it will. Once it passed, then the joy was able to show up. And so that's why these core emotions are so important. So you can just say this to yourself: sad, 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 mad, 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 shame, 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 fear, fear, fear. You can just name it, and that will help you experience it and help some of those difficult emotions drop. If anyone has a question or anything about that, feel free to add it into the chat box or unmute. So this is the work. And I love this poem by Rumi. I don't know if anyone's ever seen this before. I'll read it to you so you can hear it as well as read it. It's called The Guest House. This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. This is the work, to welcome all of those challenging emotions at the door, laughing. Okay. And like I said, I wish it could be different, but it doesn't work that way. As humans, we are emotional creatures who think. We are not thinking creatures who feel. And so those emotions are needed. So moving on, one last strategy to share. So one of the things that we know from the brain research is that we have this negativity bias, right? We're sticky. We're sticky with those negative experiences, and we're slippery with the positive ones. And so what can happen if that gets left unchecked, what can happen is that our brains can start perceiving the world through that negativity bias. And it starts to be a funhouse mirror, a little bit of a warped sense of who we are. So like, for example, one of the things Brene Brown says, if you want to see signs of you not being worthy, you will find them everywhere. But if you want to see signs that you are worthy, you will also find those everywhere. This is where imposter syndrome comes in, because we only can see our failings. We can only see our mistakes. We can only see our errors. We can't see anything else because of this negativity bias. And so one of the things that becomes really important, and this is why they tell us, watch your news consumption, watch what you're consuming on social media, right? And we can't tell the difference between real or imagined. So if we hear something happening on the news in Florida, we might interpret it as if it's happening to us wherever you are, in Vancouver, in Seattle. We might over-identify with it, okay? Because we can't tell the difference between real and imagined, and we're so grippy on the negative. So one of the ways that we can counterbalance that is practicing gratitude. Now, some of you maybe have heard of this before, and research shows that if you write 3 things that you are grateful for every single day, different things, then it can make a huge difference to your happiness, to your joy. And so anytime that you find yourself in struggle, what another powerful tool is to look for what you are grateful for. I have a client who I was just talking to the other day, and she was saying, it's hard for me to practice gratitude because it feels a little bit hollow. It's like, I'm grateful for my house, but then what comes up is this fear of, what if I lose my house, right? Like, I'm grateful for my family, but what if I lose my family? So what our work then is to find something that is super true for us, that is profoundly true. And so one thing that can help combat that, if that's a problem for you, is something that goes along this lines. In this moment, I am grateful for. In this moment, I am grateful for the house that I'm in. In this moment, I am grateful for the current state of health and well-beings of myself and the people I love. And I challenge you to look for the smallest, most ridiculous, most seemingly insignificant thing to be grateful for. I'm grateful for my warm pajamas. I am grateful for this cup of coffee. I am grateful for running water. I am grateful for the sound of those birds. And then you can expand if you want. You can get bigger. I'm grateful for the smile that I got on the Zoom meeting, or the smile from my child. I am grateful for whatever it is. I'm grateful for electricity currently running through my house. So I encourage you to get into this practice, and writing it down makes a difference, as opposed to having this attitude of gratitude. It's actually the act of writing it down or saying it and kind of committing to it. If you can commit to writing 3 things down every night, it can be a game changer. Because what happens then is, instead of your brain being trained for that negativity bias that's just already there, is that you start training your brain to go like, I wonder what's going to be on my list today. And you start looking for those things. You start looking for the gratitude. And this not only gives us a more balanced view of the world, but what it also does is it reminds us of our resourcefulness. It reminds us of our resiliency. It's hard to remember that when we're lost in our negative thoughts. It's easier to remember when we're like, oh yeah, now I know how to figure things out. So that's the power of the gratitude practice. So I'd love to hear, if you can go in the chat box, try to find one thing right now in this moment. What are you grateful for? Yoga pants. Yes. Spring, hot lunch. Oh, I got a question. Okay. The 7 p.m. horn of everyone making noise. Great. Food, my job, coffee, view of the mountains, mac and cheese. Excellent. Patio dance party. Oh, Mo telling you you're pretty in pink. I love that. For the little baby kicks. Yes. Job, family, apartment, supportive friend, basil plants that are alive after 2 weeks. Way to go. Way to keep it alive. Online fitness classes. Yes. The internet. Yes. Someone asked me, when is there a best time of day to do your gratitude? I do it at night. I do it with the kids at night before bed. So I love doing it before bed. It helps calm me down. And actually, gratitude practice is a really great thing if you wake up in your fear at 3 in the morning. I know when I lived in the Bay Area, I would wake up with fears of earthquakes all the time, and gratitude practice would help me switch out of that fear spin cycle and get back in my body. And so I love doing it at night. I think it's a great time. Some people do it in the morning too, so it's up to you. 72-hour pizza dough that's ready to eat by tomorrow. That sounds amazing. Staying connected. Excellent. Do it in the morning to start your day with 3 things, and then one great thing from the day before. I love that. So some people, you can decide, sometimes at night it's like, oh, I can be really tired, and it's hard to do that. And so if you have space for yourself in the morning, then it's a great way to kick off the day. Excellent. Excellent. Wonderful. So let's move to, we're going to move to weaving it all together. So we've got 4 strategies at least, if not more, that we're in there. So let's just do a quick review as we bring it home. So 1, just remember the context. Yes, you may be in your yoga pants with your cat watching, I don't know, was it Tiger King or whatever, like Love is Blind, whatever you're watching, you might be watching those things, but the greater context, part of the reason for the unfocus and the anxiety, the more heightened anxiety, is because there's all these other things that are happening. The grief, the VUCA. 2, come back to now. Come back to in this moment. And this is not going to be a permanent state of being. This is an exercise. It's like you're working out that muscle. So when you find yourself, it doesn't matter how long you've been in your fantasy, how long you've been in your anxiety. What matters is that you catch it and that you come back to the now. That's all that matters. Because the more you catch it, then the better off. That's the muscle to exercise. It's like then you start shrinking the distance. You might be in your spin for a couple of weeks, and then a couple of days, and then a couple of hours, and then a couple of minutes. And then you might get to that point where you notice, oh wait, I want to be anxious, but hold on, let me get back to now. Okay. And that's all it is. It's just a process to shrink that distance. 2, soothe your body, hand on heart, breathing, brushing, get yourself back to your body and soothe it. Feel it to heal it. Those emotions can be so scary, and they'll tell us now's not a good time. It'll tell us everybody's depending on you. Everyone will freak out if you have your big emotions. It'll tell us all sorts of things. But in order to get on the other side of those feelings, we really do have to feel it so we can heal it. It will get better. Practice gratitude. Truly write those words down. It is amazing what a big difference this is. And then one other one that I'm going to offer you is lean into community. This is important. And what's beautiful about this, about the crew and the membership and the connections that you have here, is that clearly you're not alone. I don't know how many people are on this call, but there's a lot. So leaning into your community, identifying who your trusted people are, it will help keep your brain more in balance and help soothe you. It brings that connection. We are hardwired for connection. And just to share a little story about that around community is that I have a client who we started working together a little less than a year ago. And she came to me because even though she had everything all together on the outside, she was a lawyer, 2 young kids, really successful practice. It's like everything seemed great on the outside, but on the inside, she was just falling apart. Tons of anxiety, hard time sleeping, felt like everything was going to fall apart if she wasn't on top of everything at all times. And she couldn't quite get out of the anxiety spiral. She was actually on the verge of maybe getting medication, but she wanted to try coaching or talking to see if that could help. No judgment around the medication, but just to see if that could help her shift things. And within a few sessions, she was able to like turn things around, right? She got her tools, her mental health got better, her sleep got better, everything got better. But then COVID-19 hit and her work ramped right up and her anxiety ramped right up with it. And she and I were talking, and the one things that she was saying is that she kind of let that community go. She didn't reach out for a session. She didn't connect with some of her other support networks, and she just let that go for about a month. And then she was like, oh, I think hold on a sec. Like, right? It's the remembering. So she remembered, I think I need support. And when we talked, she said, things got so bad that I forgot to I wasn't caring for myself. I forgot to eat. I forgot to feed myself. And I even was having a hard time feeding my kids because I was in such despair. And she's like, and what she said kind of offhand was, that's how shitty I was. Sorry for those with children. But that's what she said. That's how shitty I was. And then she kind of went to carry on. And I said, whoa, hold on. Can we go back and reframe what you just said? And reframing is a term that therapists, coaches use. It's like there's a half truth in there, right? Like there's just enough truth to believe it's true that I'm a shitty person because I wasn't eating and I wasn't giving my kids, I wasn't tracking what they were eating. But something that was even more true, reframing is finding the thing that's even more true. And what I offered was, that's how much you were suffering, was that it was hard for you to eat. That's how much suffering you were in, that it was hard to track what your kids were eating. And with that, she kind of broke down and was like, okay, yeah, that's the truth. And so this is why we need community. This is why we need connection. This is why we need mirrors. This is why we need those trusted people, because they can help us view ourselves in not that funhouse mirror way, but in a way that's more loving and supportive. Because the danger of those unchecked messages that we send to ourselves is that we can believe them. And that will keep us stuck in that anxiety spiral, that anxiety judgment spiral. And when we're stuck there, we can't tap into our resiliency. We can't tap into our resourcefulness. And it has negative impacts, right? Like if we're not well resourced, then we're not as available to ourselves, to our colleagues, to our loved ones. And so it's really important that we reframe things for ourselves. And if we can't do that, that we have other people to help us reframe things. Because when we have that community, when we have each other, we need this. I needed this. We all need this. We need those people to help us, because then we can remember. It can remind us of the truths that are even more true. And we can process in the way that helps us move forward and gets us out of our stuckness. And along those lines, this is the work I do. I'm so grateful to Crew for inviting me here, and that you prioritize this for your members. And if any of you are feeling like, I need a little extra help, these tools are great, but I would like more, I just want to say, as an offering, you can continue the work. One of the things I'm offering to you is a complimentary Calm in the Chaos session where I help you kind of look at your personal situation. What exactly are you struggling with? Where do you want to be? Come up with a plan and a vision and help give you steps so you can take action right now that are beyond what we talked about here, because there's so many more tools that can help you take that immediate action. So if you're interested in that, that's voiceofourOwn.com/calm, and we can get that going. So I offer that to anyone who needs it. I don't want people to struggle alone. It's such a hard place to be. So that is where I'm at now. I'm open to questions, feedback, comments, all of that. And feel free to unmute yourself. I see thumbs up. Hold on, I'm going to stop my share so I can see people. I can see all of you. Thoughts?
Alison, I had a question. My name is Mo.
Hi, Mo.
Hi. And I mean, you've given a lot of tips over this whole thing, so I really appreciate Karina and Miriam and the whole crew putting this together for everyone. One thing I've been noticing, I'm not a very anxious person at all, but one thing I've been noticing is that I'll wake up at like 3 in the morning, kind of like how you're saying with the Bay Area. Not worried about earthquakes, more just like thinking of whether it's my work day that's coming up. I think it's because like I'm dealing with a lot of rent deferral calls, so you know, working with tenants and telling them if we can give them rent deferral or not. And yeah, so I don't know, I wake up in the middle of the night and I kind of, it's been like almost every night that I can't sleep for like an hour, and then I finally fall back asleep at 4. But I'm just trying to think like what might be like a good practice to try to fall back asleep.
Yes. First of all, Mo, thank you for sharing. And that is a tough position. I can only imagine the kinds of conversations and the emotional state that it takes to have those conversations, and then to process what you're hearing back and engage in that conversation while holding the space that you need to hold. That's a lot. One, I feel like there's 2 things. So one is almost preventative. So it's like before you go to sleep, it's almost like envisioning. I have another tool that takes a little bit longer to walk through that I can teach you if you want to. But it's almost like envisioning all the energy of the day, all of the work that you've done, and kind of like putting it back out into the universe. It's like not exactly closing a door, but almost. It's just like, I have done what I have done. It is enough. It is now time to go to bed. And so I'm going to let everything that has happened today, one of my mantras is everything that has happened in the past, let it remain in the past. Everything that is in the future, let it remain in the future. And I'm just going to be in this sacred space of the now. And so kind of giving it that blessing of like, that was in the past. I'm going to let that remain in the past. The conversations I'm going to have in the future, I'm going to let that remain in the future. I'm just going to allow myself to give in to sleep. And so that's something that can be said kind of as a prevention, just to see. And these tools are like tea. If you just dip it in once, it's not going to give you a good tea. You got to kind of steep it a little bit. You got to practice it. So, so you can try that. And then in the moment when you do wake up, you can practice gratitude, but if it's not about gratitude, if it's not exactly that fear that something imminent is going to happen, right? Another visualization that one of my meditation teachers has taught me is like puppies in the basket. It's almost like you got a basket full of puppies, all these thoughts, all these fears. They're like puppies in a basket. They're just puppies. They want to play. They want to go out. And so you just imagine a basket. Each thought is a puppy, and you're just bringing the puppy back to the basket. Every time the puppy goes out of the basket, you bring it back to the basket. And then the puppy goes out again, you bring it back. And eventually those puppies will get tired and they will fall asleep. But that's another visual that can help.
Thank you. I know you can't see me, but I'm nodding and I'm enjoying your recommendations. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Let's send Mo a whoosh. Ready? 1, 2, 3, and a whoosh. Thank you, Mo.
Thank you.
Welcome. What else? Questions, thoughts, reflections? Any area that you would like more support around? Well, you got me on the line.
Allison, I'm joining really late in the game, but I'm going to rewatch the recording. Question for you: how are you unplugging? And sorry if you've already covered this, but we're all at home. How are you shutting off and really focusing your energy on other things when we're kind of on 24/7?
Yes, great question. Thank you, Crystal. Good to see you. So this one's tricky because what I found is that the text messages I have received and the emails I have received since all this has happened has like increased dramatically. It's like, because we're not seeing each other, there's more texting, it seems like. There's more emails. I don't know if anyone else is experiencing that. I'm seeing head nodding, yes.
Phone on the screen.
Yeah, exactly. Lots of screen. And then there's also the news and social media and Facebook. And like, sometimes I want to go down those rabbit holes and be like, oh, and I'm going to learn about this and I'm going to learn about that. But then that's not exactly always helpful. One of the things that kind of came to me early on was the realization that I know enough of what needs to happen. I know it's bad. I know it's going to last a long time. I know there's a lot of uncertainty. I know there's not a lot of answers, and that's enough. I don't know if I really need to listen to the news to get those things reaffirmed a lot. Because every time I go to the news, it's like, oh yeah, there's still a lot of uncertainty. There's still a lot of unknown. There's still a lot of complexity. So I try to limit that so I can kind of stay in the moment and present to what's actually happening. And then I just give myself grace. It's like, I'm not going to necessarily reply to all the text messages and all the emails in a rapid space. If I need the brain space, then I'm going to give myself that brain space. And I try to let people know that, like, hey, just for my mental health, I'm going to bed early. I'm turning off my phone at this time. I'm not responding, just so I can manage those expectations. Not only I can hold myself accountable to them, but I can also manage those expectations for other people.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Allison, sort of part and parcel to what Crystal was saying, I'm hearing from a lot of people about how tired they are. And I think, we're used to being at an office or maybe part-time at the office, part-time at home, but we're on all these video calls, like whether you're on a Zoom or a WebEx or a Microsoft Teams, and you're sitting at your desk, and I mean, your friends want to get together for maybe a Zoom call on Saturday with wine. I'm thinking, if I have to do one more video call, I'm just going to lose it.
Yes.
And people are just saying, I think it's because maybe you're just more on all the time that you feel a different kind of engagement.
Yes, and there's some dissonance happening too. One of the reasons why Zoom calls are so exhausting is because you're seeing people, you're hearing them, you're feeling connected, and then you turn it off and no one's around you. You're alone again.
Yeah.
So there's this cognitive dissonance that's also happening that makes it even more tired, because your brain is working in ways where it's like, wow, I'm connected, but I'm not. So that's also going on. And this takes practice, and it's taken me a long time. This happened to me yesterday. I was like, oh, I'm preparing for this presentation. I want to do this, and I want to do that, and I want to do this. And then I've got this other program that I'm running, and I want to do this. And I was just like, all I really wanted to do was zone out and watch Netflix. Like, I was so tired. I couldn't quite get the brain to work. And I realized, you know what? You got to rest.
Mm-hmm.
You got to rest, because the work I'm going to put out at that state is not going to be that good. I'm going to have to redo it. And so, or I'm going to compromise my immune system, or I'm going to get really nasty with my kids, or I'm going to yell at my husband, or you know what I mean? Like, all this other stuff is going to happen because my energy tank is on fumes. So when the energy tank's on fumes, we got to refill the energy tank. And I call it slingshot time. It's like a slingshot, you pull back so you can launch forward. Like, you can only throw a rock so far if you're just pushing it forward. But if you pull it back and you build up enough tension, then you can really launch that thing forward. And so I try to give myself that slingshot time as much as possible. It feels like I'm not doing anything, but what I'm actually doing in that rest is I'm building up the tension so that I can launch forward. Otherwise, I'm just kind of like lurching forward bit by bit. Is that helpful? Okay.
Yeah,
Excellent.
thank you.
Let's send a one whoosh to Crystal and then another whoosh to Michelle. Ready? One whoosh to Crystal, 1, 2, 3, and a whoosh. And one to Michelle, 1, 2, 3, whoosh. Excellent. Any other thoughts, comments, reflections, questions, support?
I just have a quick question. I don't have children, but I spend a lot of time with my nephew, and they obviously pick up a lot on the anxiety and the stress of what's going on. Do you have any quick tips or thoughts on how you're handling children or how to handle younger kids at this age or at this stage?
Yes, great question. So there's kind of two sides, two things, I think, in all of this is our children are like sponges to us, to the adults in their life, the adults that matter in their life, even the other adults, like they are impacted. So when we can find calmness for ourselves, they will settle. If we can settle ourselves, our children will settle. Or rather, they will be more likely to be settled. That doesn't mean, and the other thing too is like, we can fool ourselves and be like, oh, they're 2, they don't really know what's going on, it's no big deal. Oh, they're 4, they don't really understand what's happening, it's no big deal. Oh, they're whatever, they don't really understand what's going on, it's no big deal. But the fact is that they are having their experience. And their experience is just as real and as profound as yours. The good news about children is that those big emotions that we can run and hide from, they experience those every single day. So they're not one of the things that we tell ourselves is like, our kids will freak out if we are feeling big emotions. And it's like, no, actually your children are probably going to be the most empathic people to you because they have felt those emotions themselves. They felt it yesterday over a bowl of Cheerios. So it doesn't matter why they're experiencing it. What matters is that they know how to experience big emotions because they do. And so part of our role as adults becomes to create that space so they can fall apart. And it's hard when we're falling apart and they're falling apart. But crying with your children right now is a beautiful gift. Not like, so they have to take care of you crying with them, but rather, and I'll tell you, I push the limits with my kids. Like my daughter had a major meltdown. She's a really emotional kid. She had a total blowout. And for children, a lot of times it'll show up as anger. It'll show up as resistance. It'll show up as, freaking out over really small things. But that's when it's like, it's not about the situation. What it's about is that emotion, right? Like she's experiencing anger. She's experiencing sadness. And so to sit with her in her anger and in her sadness, I mean, I don't curse with my kids, but I was like, I remember I told them, my daughter, when she was in the midst of it and so angry at me, but it wasn't about me, it was about the thing. And once I got her settling down and her saying, I hate this virus, I was like, I dropped an F-bomb. I was like, I fucking hate this virus too. Like, and she was like, oh, she's like, it is such a, that damn virus. Like, so she started cursing and we just had this sweet little moment of us cursing about the virus and us being sad and angry together. And like, she hasn't done it since, right? Like it was just so needed in that moment because it's like my heart is connected to her heart. My heart's breaking like her heart's breaking. So, but we have to do that work ourselves. So we're not triggered by it. And we're not trying to, if we're shutting it down with ourselves, we're likely shutting it down with our kids. Mm-hmm. And so the more we can take care of ourselves, the better off we can take care of our kids. Yeah, you're welcome.
Allison, I have a quick question.
Yes.
And nice to see you guys and nice to see everyone. And Crystal, your hair looks way too good for quarantine. I'm just going to put that out there. But
Okay, I was on a panel. I don't normally look like this.
looks perfect. But, you know, Allison, I think this was a lot about self, and the more we take care of ourselves, the more we can take care of whether it's our kids and such. But particularly in real estate, we work in such cross-functional collaborative teams. And I have definitely seen people's emotions get better of them, you know, in team situations during this. And I guess, what is the one thing as leaders you think we can be doing to help our teams through this as we're working with them daily?
Mm-hmm. Great question, Ashley. So one of the things I think as leaders is that, you know, those stages of grief, those are real. Everybody's experiencing it. And so just like our kids might be freaking out over the Cheerios, but it's not about the Cheerios, it's actually about the virus. Our colleagues and the people we work with and collaborate with, they might be freaking out over this seemingly stupid thing, but they're getting stuck on it because they're so overwhelmed with the gravity of everything else that's going on. And so it's almost similar to the question that Karina asked. It's like, when we can care for our emotions, we're going to be less triggered by our colleagues. We're going to be less, you know, triggered by some of their behaviors. We're going to be a little more empathic and understanding. And then I think some of it can be just to name it, you know, just to name it. Like and people are getting tired of it being named. Like, I do understand there's like a saturation level. It's like somebody who I know just said, if I hear new norm once again, I'm going to scream. So there's a little bit of a saturation point, but you know, to just say like, hey, we're all doing the best we can. We're all trying our hardest. We're not going to be perfect. This might get messy. And we're going to have to be okay with the messiness that we bring and the messiness that happens. And the key is we're going to keep trying. We're going to keep trying. But I just want to acknowledge that none of us are really going to be operating at our top level right now. Some of it can also be managing some expectations for people, being mindful that I think one of the dangers that we're experiencing right now is that we're applying old rules to a new game. Like, we're applying the old rules of, you know, when you're at work, you're 100% at work, and home life needs to stay behind you, and you need to be on and give it your all, and all of those things. Like, that's an old rule. That was the rule when our kids went to school. That was the rule when we went to work. That made sense because there was work and there was home. But now home and work have just completely blurred. So we have to be mindful of the old rules in this new world, new game, and make sure that there's an alignment in those two.
I really like that. Old rules in a new game. That's hitting home.
Yeah. And it's hard to let go of those old rules because they made sense and they're what we know and it's what we're familiar with, but the game has changed. And so the quicker we can get into the new game, the better off we'll be able to be in that new game. Yeah, you're welcome. Let me send a whoosh to you.
Please.
All right, 1, 2, 3, and a whoosh. Let's do a whoosh for Karina. And a whoosh. And let's do a whoosh up in the air for all the children and all of the spouses and all the people that have to live with us. Let's just send a whoosh up to them. 1, 2, 3, and a whoosh. Excellent. Excellent. I see some people needing to jump off. Any last comments before we close?
We good?
We good? Again, if you would like more support, if I can just do one more plug, voiceofourown.com/calm. I'd love to be able to support you if you're needing more support. And thank you all so much for your attention and questions and presence. I'm so grateful.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Allison. And we're really excited to have lots more events coming up. So please stay tuned. And Allison, we are also grateful for your gift and thank you for sharing so much with us today on behalf of everyone at Crew and all the members and sponsors.
Thank you. Thank you. And a whoosh, 1, 2, 3, and a whoosh to everyone, whoosh.
Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
Thanks for joining.
Take care. Thanks, everyone.